Welcome everyone to Real Talk Baseball. We are at least one of us is in mourning right now. And John, I'm sorry, we have to bring this up right away, man. Your Philadelphia Phillies, they have been knocked out of postseason contention in a pretty devastating loss, man. How you feeling?
You don't have to ask. I guess we don't need to talk about it, but for the next hour, let's do it anyway. I'm sad. I don't want to tell you the better team won, but destiny and the baseball gods don't lie.
Yeah, it kind of sucks, man. It's like you go back to the beginning of the season. The Phillies were the hottest thing on earth. It felt like they were just unstoppable. It was every Philadelphia fan's dream come true. It's like you haven't had that feeling since what was it, like almost 20 years ago, 15, 16 years ago, when the Phillies ended up going to the World Series. Everyone thought the Phillies were going to the World Series this year, and just to be cut short in the first round of the playoffs, it's sad, man. And I'm sad for you, and I'm sad for Philadelphia fans. I'm sad for baseball fans in general, because I love the Philadelphia fan base. They are so passionate about everything when it comes to Philly sports, and I love to see that from fans. And I saw it from you. I saw it from everyone around me. Friends and at work, and just people that I talk to, and it was tough to watch, man. And I really think that it really came down to a couple things. And the first, well, actually, first, before we get into it, we do have a special guest on the show today. He is running a little bit behind, but he will be here shortly. So for those that are in the chat right now, he will be here. So go ahead and stick around. Hopefully he'll be here within the next 15 minutes or so. We'll see.
He's finishing up a daughter school event, but we got Jon Marks coming on the show. So Philadelphia's no Jon Marks.
Yeah, and I had actually personally never heard the name before, but I'm not from this area. I only moved here 6 years ago, but I have checked out his new show, and it's pretty. He has some really interesting takes, to say the least. So I'm excited to get him on the show and kind of just hear what he has to say about the state of the Philadelphia Phillies now and going into the future. Let's see. Garrett says, "Still love my Phillies." Bro, I don't know about that one, man. I feel like because you're the homie and your team's not in it anymore, I feel like you gotta support the homies, man. If you're not gonna root for the Phillies because they're out, you gotta go for the homies team. And you can't say that to me, man. I will punch you in your face next time I see you, and then give you a kiss after, because I know it's gonna hurt.
Yeah, I think Garrett and I just became best friends. So let's talk some Phillies, though, and I think we need to at least kick it off. I am going to say that the Phillies, you really hit it off by saying, yes, we had high expectations, but we do need to also congratulate the New York Mets. As much as I hate to say it, the Mets are hot. The Mets are hot. Team of destiny right now. And as much shit as I've talked on the Phillies having the best record for most all of the season, and only to really just not show up when it really mattered the most, this entire season really felt backwards from the jump. And not just baseball fans know how weird this season's been, but specifically Phillies fans. I mean, we're not used to winning the division and winning it easily. It's been the Braves division. We had some injuries that, really helped us win the division. I'll be honest, with Acuna being out all year, Spencer Strider. So this was the year for the Phillies, and there really was no excuse for them not to. And there was a few key decisions that they made throughout the year that really allowed them, that said, you belong where we are right now, and that's heading to the golf course. Unfortunately, there's a lot more they could have done, and I think they remained calm throughout the year, thinking that, not that it was a lock, but that they were good enough, and they weren't.
The Phillies weren't going to be able to sustain what they were doing in the first half. There's no way that a team could stay that hot all year long. They would end the season with 130 wins, and that's not going to happen. Not in today's game when it's so competitive, especially in that division with like the Braves, like you said, man. And I think the Phillies really caught a break with the Braves going down like they did. Like you said, Spencer Strider and Acuna, but also Austin Riley was having a down season. Matt Olson was having a down season. Ozzy Albies had the injury that kept him out for a lot of the season. He was back towards the end, but it by that time it didn't really matter. You said it earlier. The Mets got hot, and they got hot at the right time. The Phillies were the hottest team in baseball in the first half, and then you have the Mets as one of the hottest teams in baseball in the second half, and
It's all that matters.
They're just
It's
carrying
all that matters.
They're carrying it into the postseason, and when you have guys like Sean Manaea that just kind of like shut down the offense, like who would have thought that Sean Manaea was going to be as good as he is in 2024 in the postseason in 2024? This is a guy that has. He's had his ups and downs throughout his career, but man, he's made some major adjustments. And Jose Quintana, that 10 years ago, he was the one that, a lot of people were looking at like, oh, Jose Quintana, he's so good. He's so good. But he fell off, dude. And now he's pitching in the postseason and he looked pretty damn good also.
Garrett knows what's up. That is great. So I do want to quickly, I wanted to touch base on Ernie's comment there on the Phillies windows closing. And I think that kind of leads to all of what we're going to talk about for the rest of the podcast, of course, too. But I think the current roster as it's constructed, the window is definitely closing. There's no arguing that. But I think what we're also not factoring in is that the Phillies farm system's as good as it's been in my entire lifetime. So they have not just decent prospects coming up. They have actual great prospects coming up. Aiden Miller, Mick Abel, who was supposed to be great, could be a good pitcher, but Andrew Painter will be a great pitcher. Justin Crawford, who is Carl Crawford's nephew, is 20 years old, tearing it up in the minors. So they have guys coming up. And when we say windows closing, I think 2025 is going to be a very, very interesting year for the Phillies because I'm going to say it's a carryover year. I think that come 2026, you're going to have guys like Aiden Miller potentially in the lineup. Andrew Painter's got a year under his belt because next year he will probably be in the rotation to start the year. He will definitely be in the rotation by All-Star break. And I think this team could look a lot different if they're able to make one or two big moves this offseason and replace the guys that didn't perform. Now, that goes along with a lot of different avenues of how to get there. That could be through trades. That could be through free agency. And that could be just getting rid of, I want to say, trimming the fat, getting rid of the guys that aren't great for clubhouse culture. Guys like Taijuan Walker, who, you have a guy like Anthony Rendon for the Angels. You think that's bringing up the clubhouse culture? Absolutely not. And the same can be said for good teams too. Good teams have those guys. Taijuan Walker and Alec Boehm really hurt the Phillies in this offseason.
Yeah. Alec Boehm was just so good in the beginning of the season, man. And now I'm wondering how much stock teams actually have in Alec Boehm, because Alec Boehm has 2 more years of arbitration before he reaches free agency in 2027. So is this the type of guy that the Phillies want to hang on to and extend, or do you kind of like is it rebuild time already? Do you want to trade Alec Boehm and go for what you guys really need, and that's bullpen pieces? There are some arms out there that are definitely going to be on trade radars, and one of them that comes to mind is Ryan Helsley from the St. Louis Cardinals. Now, Helsley is very, very valuable right now. He was a very valuable closer for the Cardinals, but I feel like the Cardinals aren't really going to be playing for anything anytime soon. They just don't have it right now, so Are the Phillies going to try to make something like that happen? Maybe not necessarily with the Cardinals, but just kind of in general. Because okay, we could talk about Hoffman, how he, in game 4, he ended up going back out in the 6th inning, which was a decision by Rob Thompson to let him finish the 5th. He got 2 outs in the 5th, only threw 8 pitches, and then came back in the 6th inning in game 4. And then, he kind of just he let the offense kind of take off. Now, okay, before we get into anything else, what are your thoughts on Rob Thompson leaving Jeff Hoffman in to pitch the 6th, knowing that he's not really the type of reliever to go multiple innings?
Yeah, I mean the playoffs are all, you got to ride the hot hand no matter who it is, and I think a manager knows his guys more than anything. I think with Jeff Hoffman in this case, it didn't work out, but it's so much easier to say after the fact. You're planning for a game 5, and at the same time, you also have to stay alive. So you have to keep, if you're feeling that Jeff Hoffman can give you at least 1 more out, 2 more outs, or even another full inning, and see what you can get from him, and that just didn't happen. So it's easier to say obviously after the fact. And if you get a 1, 2, 3 there, this is not even a conversation. But no doubt he left him in too long. And with that said, switching over, and I don't even want to talk about the Francisco Lindor Grand Slam at all. We're not going to do that today. We're not going to do that. But yeah, you hit it right on the head that Rob Thompson, and this is a big picture item for me as a Phillies fan, just being, completely honest today, is that Rob Thompson stayed too calm yesterday. He stayed too calm in September. He stayed too calm since the All-Star break. And all season, he stayed too calm because of what we saw early on. And what we saw early on was this team at its very best. And he said, I know that is in this team, and it will come out when it matters. And it just didn't. But ultimately, him leaving in there is what Rob Thompson did all season, and that's stick with his guys and not listen to what anybody else thinks or cares. And it didn't pan out for him. But it also didn't pan out for him last year. And obviously, the Phillies did not win the World Series in 2021 either. So I think Rob Thompson is a guy that the players believe in a ton. But I think at the same time, at what point do you say, is this a player's coach and it's not working? What are we going to do differently here?
The manager job in the Philadelphia dugout has been a revolving door for the past few years. So do you think that Rob Thompson is the guy? Is that who the Philadelphia Phillies are going to be sticking with to lead their team and hopefully bring a championship back to Philadelphia?
Yeah, I think he's coming back next year. At the end of the day, the Phillies still had the second best record in the NL minus the Warriors. But you don't fire a guy like that. You have him on the hot seat. If he comes back next year, there's no energy in the playoffs. They come out flat again. There's no chance. But I think, give you a little insight to what's going on with the Eagles too. It's the same thing. The Eagles last year started off 10-1, and the Phillies this year started 62-36, 62-33. And just went flat. And they brought back Nick Sirianni because of what he did and got there. But if you come back and now you're flat again, now you're really on the hot seat. And I think Rob Thompson's going to have next year. But if the Phillies don't make it at least to the World Series or win the World Series or see something differently, if they switch this roster around and will be there, then they should be in the mix. And Rob Thompson should be on the hot seat if they're not there. But I'll bring him back for next year.
Okay, so manager job, let's say it's safe for now. Which players do you think could be on the trade block? Let's start with position players, hitters. So any position players that you think could be on the trade block other than Alec Bohm, which we kind of mentioned earlier, that could possibly be like the top guy?
I did want to hit on your Alec Bohm take because they're not just going to trade Alec Bohm. Again, what Alec Bohm can be. I mean, he was an all-star this year. And the fact that we're having this conversation about trading Alec Bohm, if you told me this at the All-Star break, I'd be literally giggling like a schoolgirl right now. And, we're having this conversation because he mentally showed he wasn't strong enough for the playoffs this year. And that's unacceptable for an all-star third baseman in the playoffs for a team that's been there 3 years in a row and should be advancing without question. So that's why Alec Bohm's name is now in trade talks. but they're not just going to trade him away unless they can improve their lineup. And the only way I can see that you can really improve the third base position would be to sign a guy like Alex Bregman, and then you can trade Bohm. But you don't do that unless you have a contingency plan already lined up. So trading Bohm for Ryan Helsley wouldn't solve anything other than having a closer, but now you have a bigger hole in your lineup. And that's what really caused the most issues for the Phillies, is that their bats went cold. So I don't see that happening unless they sign a Bregman or bring in a huge third base bat or something.
You would have to probably make a trade because Alex Bregman, who knows what's going to happen with him. He's not really a difference maker anymore anyway. Defensively, he's definitely better than Bohm, but bat wise, like Bohm is the type of guy that's going to hit gaps. He's going to hit a bunch of doubles. He had 40 doubles this season. He's not going to hit a bunch of home runs. He's not that guy, even though he's like 6'5", and he's a big dude, but he just doesn't hit home runs. It's the line drive swing, and he does get on base, at least in the beginning of the season he did, and he kind of fell off towards the end. But, I think that in the middle somewhere is the true Alec Bohm. He's not the super hot hitter that we saw in the beginning of the season, but he's also not the guy that was going over towards the end. I think that he's definitely in the middle somewhere. And if the Phillies end up keeping Alec Bohm for the next 2 years, that's great. I don't see any problem with that. He's definitely come into his own defensively. He's not the best third baseman out there, but he's also not the worst. There's a lot of other, like, look at the Dodgers, for example. Max Muncy is not a good third baseman, but there's no other options, right? You have to have Max Muncy's bat in your lineup. That's the thumper. That's the one that's going to get the RBIs and the home runs, other than, a couple other guys in there. But, that's the guy you have at number 5 in the lineup. Just like, I want to save what I was going to say for later when Jon joins the show with us.
We might be getting a little heated here in a bit.
Yeah. So, all right.
Now, you mentioned other Phillies and other potential trade topics, and this is where, we'll also talk with Jon Marks on this a bit too. But one guy, I'm not one of them, but the fan base in general is tired of Trey Turner, man. And Trey Turner has not had – Trey Turner's shining moment as a Philly is a standing ovation sarcastically given by the fans to get his bat going, which they are now making a Netflix documentary about. So –
Are they really?
They really are. When you think of it like that, I mean, Trey Turner has been, I don't want to say a huge disappointment in Philly, but Trey Turner's definitely been a disappointment for sure as a Philly. I think maybe not to the extent that the majority of Phillies fans that I talk to, basically act like he hit $150 all season with 4 homers. But, for him to come up this cold in the postseason, that needs to be addressed. And, he can't just be not held accountable for, another back-to-back postseasons without not even a moment, but just hitting, I want to say, below the Mendoza line combined. So I'm not saying you're going to be able to trade a Trey Turner, but if there was a team out there that would take on a Trey Turner contract and you could just let go of that, I'm sure the Phillies would actually love that option. But I don't think that there's a team out there that would just take Trey Turner for nothing, as the same can be said for Mike Trout.
But okay, so the thing is, when you sign a guy like Trey Turner, you look at the surface numbers, and the surface numbers are great. 300 hitter. He has a good amount of stolen bases every single season, because I want to say he's like top 15 when it comes to sprint speed in the league. But I watched Trey Turner when he played for the Dodgers, and, I saw with my own eyes that he's not the guy, at least in my opinion. His batting average solidly every season about 300. He hit 295 this season, only 19 stolen bases, which is kind of out of character for him. But he only played 121 games this year. So, and he's 31 years old. A lot of people don't realize that he's so young because he has such a baby face. He looks like he's like 27, and if he was 27, then maybe he'd be doing a little bit better. But he does have that sprint speed still. And I think that's actually his real bread and butter, because a lot of those hits that he hits the ball on the ground a lot, man. And with the speed that he has, he can leg it out and he'll get safe. He'll be safe at first, and then he could just steal second, and I feel like that is going to be his claim to fame. Basically career wise, he's never really been like that super clutch hitter. Even looking at his doubles, he's never had a season where he hit over 40 doubles, and for a guy with his speed, you can't hit 40 doubles when you're top 10 sprint speed. Like that's just crazy to me, man. And that was so 39 was his career high in doubles, and that was in 2022, the year that he spent with the Dodgers when he was part of the trade with the Max Scherzer. And he batted 298 that season, had an 809 slugging, very similar to this season, 295 batting average with an 807 OPS, not slugging. And that's just the kind of player that he is, and he kind of is a defensive liability. I don't trust him at shortstop. And when the Dodgers had Corey Seager and Trey Turner for a little while, Trey Turner ended up moving to second base, and he was making a lot of errors. And it was kind of like, that's what it was just expected of him from then on. And then, Corey Seager ended up signing with Texas, and then they moved Trey Turner back over to shortstop, and everyone's like, all right, he's back in his spot now, and he'll probably work it out, but dude, he still makes a bunch of errors. He's a defensive liability, and Alec Boehm is somewhat of a defensive liability. So you have both of your infielders on the left side, where most hits go to, as defensive liabilities. What do you think is going to happen? I feel like the Phillies definitely prioritize bats over defense. Like when they moved Bryce Harper from right field to first base, it was for one, to protect his arm, but they also didn't really have another first baseman to man at first base because Rhys Hoskins was out. He was out with injury, and then he was going to hit free agency anyway. And he was always a defensive liability at first also. And then he was a defensive liability in left field when they moved him out to left field, because Carlos Santana was also the first baseman of the Phillies. I know you got something on your brain. Go ahead and say it.
I wasn't expecting Carlos Santana Phillies chat here, so here we are. No, I mean, I think there's a lot of creative solutions, and you've hit like 15 points that I'm excited to continue to talk about. So don't go anywhere if you want to hear some more exciting Phillies talk, and maybe we'll get some other baseball talk in here too. Maybe not. But I will say, what about moving Trey Turner to outfield if he's such a defensive liability?
I love that.
And that ultimately solves your outfield problem. Or we can move Bryce Harper back to outfield. This is the first baseman free agent class, by the way. And I'm just going to read off a couple of these free agent names. And then I do want to talk more free agents with Jon Marks too. But just here are a couple free agent names that the Phillies could replace if you just want to put Bryce Harper in the outfield, where, he only spent the first, 11 years of his career. Christian Walker, Pete Alonso, Paul Goldschmidt, Ryan O'Hearn, Josh Bell, and this guy named Rhys Hoskins. Yeah.
Can I tell you my favorite real quick of all these? Sure. And I think you already know who it is. And that is the hometown boy, the guy that grew up in the Philadelphia area. And that's Christian Walker, man. Christian Walker is he is so underrated. Now, he was injured for majority of this season, 2024, so he really couldn't shine to try to get that big free agency contract. But the Diamondbacks, are they looking to extend him? Probably not, right? Because there's other guys that are going to be coming up on free agency within the next few years that they're going to want to extend instead. A guy like Corbin Carroll that's going to cost a lot of money to keep, and they have some money already invested in Zach Gallen. And I don't know if they really want to spend that much money on a first baseman that didn't really show much this season. It wasn't his fault he got hurt, right? But I love Christian Walker in Philadelphia, man. I think that move makes so much sense, and he's not going to be that expensive. Now, the Phillies do have money. They have a lot of money that they can spend. The owners were talking about it a couple years ago when they were like, "Oh, we're just going to be buying and buying and buying and buying and buying," right? And they did. They went out and got Harper, and they went out and got Trey Turner, signed Zach Wheeler, signed Nola, and then that's it.
Schwarber, Castellanos, Muto. What do you mean? They're paying Schwarber and Castellanos $45 million combined.
Yeah, but those guys are gone soon. I'm talking about like long-term deals, and how much Schwarber's getting paid, what, like $20 million a year right now for the next I think next season, and then Castellanos is about the same. So then 26. That money comes off the books
in 26, after 26.
So then that money comes off the books, and you have a bunch of money where you can. And Ray Muto is almost gone too. I think Ray Muto only has 2 more seasons left on his contract,
and that's why I think next year is a super, super interesting year for the Phillies, because you're losing Real Muto and Schwarber, which combined right there is like $47 million, give or take. So if you can just suck it up next year and sign a guy, I don't know, I'm going to throw out, I like this left-handed bat from New York, Juan Soto. He could be pretty good.
Come on,
seriously, man. Why?
I don't think Juan Soto wants to leave New York. I think he loves
Juan Soto would have signed already there if he didn't want to leave New York. Juan Soto wants to see what everyone's going to pay, and that's literally all that matters. He doesn't care what state. He would play for the Pirates for $50 million a year.
Well, the thing is also is that other teams cannot offer him a contract while he is still with the team, while he's still with the Yankees. They can't offer him anything until he actually does hit free agency, which doesn't happen for another month or so. So yes, he does want to see how much he can get from other teams, but I don't think he wants to see what he can get from other teams because he's thinking about possibly going to another team. I think he's trying to drive up his price so that the Yankees are the ones that are going to have to pay it.
I don't disagree with you, and I do think he ultimately will go back to the Yankees. I think, if this is just me being completely honest with you, Yankees, Mets, Phillies. But I think the Phillies are going to come like they did with Yamamoto with the largest offer. And the Mets will probably match that offer, but he stays with the Yankees if it's close.
Yeah, if it's close. And then you also have to think about taxes. Like, a lot of people don't think about this, but dude, New York taxes are insane.
That's all factored in, no doubt.
If you sign with New York or with any Los Angeles team or California team, the government's going to take a big portion of your paycheck, of your contract, and when you go to a place like Philadelphia that the state tax here is only 6%, then the contract doesn't really seem too bad.
Philadelphia is 8%.
Oh, is it? I thought must have went up. Jon Marks Media, what's up, man? Thanks for joining the show. How's it going?
Yo, how are you guys?
We are.
What's up, John?
What's up? What's going on?
How you feeling?
I mean, listen, I'm good. I know it's the baseball show. We're here to talk Phillies. Yeah, I'm kind of conflicted with this team and how I feel going forward.
I'm glad you say that. So we've been chatting about that here for the past half hour, and we're trying to figure out a couple of solutions. We basically took the pulse on what just went on, not only this past season. I basically alluded to, I thought Rob Thompson just kind of let these guys go. He thought all along that this team would just show up in the postseason because they showed up in the first quarter of the season. And he just said, they will figure it out. I believe in my guys. And he let them try, and it did not work.
Yeah. Charlie Manuel in 2008, if you remember, he was ridiculed in his first couple of years as Phillies manager. He didn't know how to do double switches. He was by a lot of people, especially in talk radio, he's not intelligent. He's an idiot. And what happens when you get great players? Well, like, sometimes when you get great players, you can just kind of sit back. And I'm not telling you that Charlie wasn't a good manager, but you know what I mean? Like, sometimes just creating an atmosphere in the clubhouse where guys are comfortable and they're happy to come to work every day. When you have great talent like that, then sometimes you win. And I feel like that's the formula with Rob Thompson as well. Strategically, do you ever feel like that you're getting like a really sharp baseball guy with in-game decisions out there. I mean, I don't really feel like that. I've watched a lot of playoff baseball this year. I think the series has been great. And like, like normally talent wins. Baseball's so finicky and weird that you could have the best team for 80% of the season, and then all of a sudden you kind of go through a little funk and you're gone. So I don't think Rob Thompson's done a great job the last 2 postseasons with some moves. And we can nitpick, and I can go back to Jeff Hoffman staying in the game or him not being ready to bring in somebody else, like whatever. If the offense isn't scoring runs, if they have 1 run, like how many games is this team going to win? And you're talking about a high-powered, high-priced bunch of veterans. So like, I like Rob Thompson. I think that they appreciate his personality and his demeanor, but at some point you got to try somebody else. Joe Girardi, it was the same team. They got rid of Joe Girardi. They turned it around immediately. So sometimes you need to balance. Oh, he's a really nice guy with somebody that has a little bit more urgency and a little bit more fire.
I 100% agree with that. And that's one thing Will and I had discussed. And I kind of see a little bit of a Nick Sirianni effect here is that, they start off 10-1 last year, and you're not firing a guy who has led a team to the Super Bowl, then starts 10-1 and it blows up. And that's what I feel in the same sense that is going to happen with Rob Thompson, is that he's going to get at least another year. And if this happens again next year, we're not having this conversation. He's already fired today.
I would agree. Yeah, he gets the benefit of the doubt, even though they've went World Series appearance, just historic collapse in the NLCS last year, and now you've lost to the Mets. Hey, you guys are obviously big baseball fans. It's not crazy that the Phillies lost to the Mets. We see this all the time. Not all the better team doesn't always win. The better team through 162 doesn't always win. The Mets had that feel. The Mets had that look. I resisted it. I didn't want to cower to the Mets, but everybody felt it after watching the Phillies 2 years ago, after watching the Diamondbacks last year. So like you felt it. But there was also opportunity to win that series. And you feel like that if you had a little bit of a sharper manager, or you had a guy that was maybe motivating them a little bit better. I mean, I don't know. He tried.
See, and that's where I was in my head also, because I didn't see anyone in the Phillies dugout firing anybody up. I didn't see really like a clubhouse leader. Now, I'm not a Phillies fan, but I watch a lot of Phillies baseball because I live in the area and I have a baseball podcast. So I have to have the content to talk about, so I'm on the outside looking in, but I didn't really see a leader in the clubhouse. Now, Bryce Harper should be the guy, right? He's the guy that's the longest tenured. He's going to be there the longest amount of time, him and Trey Turner both, but we know Trey Turner's not a leader. Harper needs to be the leader, and I just didn't see it from him.
Yeah, so with a little bit of insight into the clubhouse, Bryce Harper is 100% your leader by example. He's not actually a loud guy. I know his personality after he hits the home run and it's LFG, and he has the handshakes and the things that he does with all his teammates, but like he really is kind of a soft-spoken guy. The guys love him. Kyle Schwarber is your leader. He is 100% your leader in that clubhouse. Bryce serves the role by being a leader by example, and he's Bryce Harper, and he handles his business very well. Bryce actually with the media is a guy that even after a bad night, Bryce will come up to one of the beat guys and say, hey, do you need anything else tonight? Do you need me tonight? And so like he's very respectful of the process of being a star in Major League Baseball. And I think everybody on the Phillies respects that. It feels like they need another guy in there. Maybe
let's go, John. Let's go.
So like sometimes you need a good cop and a bad cop, right? Like you need Joe Torre was the good cop. Larry Bowa was the bad cop as far as on the coaching staff. So I don't know if you need a bad cop on the coaching staff, but Kyle Schwarber may be the leader, but you need somebody that's going to come in there and be like, you know what, damn it. No, that's not good enough. Yo, Alec Boehm, stop acting like a baby. Get that look off your face. I mean, everybody's watching it. He's like sulking over on the bench, right? And I know that was a problem before when he was younger, but like you need to come in. You said that you didn't see a lot of fire on the bench. This team is best when it's a little bit cocky and confident when they're playing, right? They were dead because they they had no confidence. And like, one of the reasons I like, at least initially, that they were bringing Sosa into the lineup for Bohm was Sosa has a little bit of that cockiness about him, right? Has a little bit of that energy in the lineup. It didn't work, but yeah, I don't know what the move is, but I would like to change this clubhouse up a little bit. I feel like they need another veteran guy in there.
A veteran, but a veteran with energy. Like I love Harper's intensity, but I don't see the energy from him to get everyone fired up. Like you said that he has the respect of the clubhouse, and I totally get that. You know, he's the strong silent type, and that's great, you know, but that doesn't exude the rest of the team, you know. And I feel like there's guys like in San Diego, like Tatis, that are firing up this team, and he's one of the main reasons now. Even take his offense aside, he's there firing these guys up and making these guys have fun playing the game of baseball. And I didn't really see the Phillies having fun playing this division series.
So I need to take a second here because Jon Marks just jumped into it real quick. Obviously, my dog is saying hi too and reminding us that Jon Marks just jumped in here like a champ, just started talking Phillies baseball. And we didn't even introduce the gentleman properly. So Jon Marks, if you could please talk to us and tell us about your podcast and tell us what's been going on in your world too.
Yeah, I at the beginning of September, I guess, late August, beginning September, I started working for the digital network PHLY, which is was the fourth network for All City Networks. First one was in Denver. They opened one in Phoenix, then in Chicago, then Philly about a year ago, and then they launched in Dallas right at about the time I was starting. So we're in 5 cities right now, and it's you know, it's almost like a sports talk radio on the digital side of things. So it's available on YouTube. It's available on Roku TV. Like I look down the road 3, 4, 5 years from now where Amazon's going to have this type of a fast channel, as they call them. So it's available via podcast or wherever you get your podcast. Just search Philly with Jon Marks or search PHLY Sports and you can find it. It's an hour. It's 8 a.m. to 9 a.m. to start. You know, hopefully by the end of football season, we'll go to a second hour if that's something we decide to do. But no, I did sports radio in Philly for 20 years, almost 20 years. So, you know, the landscape has changed over that time, and a lot of people are moving to digital. And I felt like it was a great time for me to do the same thing as well. So,
I actually did put your link in the description in this. This video. So for anyone that's watching that wants to go over to that channel, you can go ahead and click that link anytime.
Yeah, I think the biggest challenge for me is being on sports radio in Philly. A lot of people listen. So even tonight, I was in an event for my kids, and like a couple guys came up and was like, "Oh man, miss you on the radio, love you." Blah, blah. And I'm trying to tell them I'm doing this new thing. They have very little interest in watching it. They just love me when they could put on WIP and they listen to me. So it's trying to convert a city like Philadelphia that is very sports radio savvy to like, hey, you can also hear sports talk in other varieties. That's just not WIP or the Fanatic if that's what you listen to. So it's challenging trying to convert these people, but it's a part of the process when you're trying to build something. So that's where we are right now, and it's actually cool. It's very exciting. So I appreciate the shout out, guys.
I'm a radio head myself, and there's a reason that we follow YouTube too. Your show is awesome. Keep doing what you're doing. And you are genuinely one of the nicest dudes that I've ever met too. So I do appreciate you obviously coming on our show, but I am here to disagree with you on a few of your takes as well. And we wouldn't be here if we couldn't have some fun with it. So I first wanted to talk, you know, really and talk about what is your biggest, if you were the GM of the Phillies and you have one move you can make and to fix this team, you can only make one. What's one move you're going to do, whether that's a free agent, a trade, and what does that look like? Because we have to be, it's not our money. You know, Philadelphians are probably the best fan base in baseball, maybe sports, at spending our owners' money. But the Phillies are very close to that luxury tax. And we have an owner that we know is willing to spend. And what I was getting at with Will before you hopped on here is that I think next season, 2025, is going to be such a seesaw year because it can go either way quickly. I think 2026, you know, you talked about this window closing, and I think it's actually just starting to open to the next level of Phillies. And I think we're looking at Justin Crawford coming up, Aiden Miller, Mick Abel, if we can get anything from him. and Andrew Painter. I mean, we are talking not just about good prospects, but these are the best prospects that the Phillies have had in my lifetime, at least, but definitely since, the early 2000s with Hamels, Rollins, and, that group that came up. But with next year, what does that look like? Do you see them going over the luxury threshold here? And what's one move if you say, I'm going to fix the Phillies, what would that look like?
Man, I mean, you hit a lot there. The prospects thing, definitely, I want to touch on as well. It's difficult because most of their roster is pretty much set. Schwarber's not going anywhere, nor should he. Obviously, Harper. Trey Turner has an untradeable contract. He's not going anywhere. JT's in the final year of his contract, as well as Schwarber. They tried to move on from Castellanos last year, and there weren't any takers. He has 2 years left on his contract, but he was also very productive, right? Like, for all he drives you nuts sometimes. He's an interesting guy. He's got an interesting personality. But this dude, he contributes. He's productive. So if you're going to trade him, you're doing it for salary relief. You still have to replace him. They already need another outfield bat. I don't know if you can go into the season with Marsh and Rojas as your left fielder and your center fielder. In fact, I know that you can't. But as you mentioned, they don't have a ton of payroll. And I do think John Middleton will spend if it means that he thinks it's a significant upgrade. What I think Dave Dombrowski is going to do, because the question you asked is, what would you do? It's a very difficult question. And you need an executive like Dombrowski that can figure this out, because it's not going to be easy. To me, it feels like he's going to try to move maybe a Castellanos or something like that. And he's going to try to more or less like use that trade and get somebody, and then maybe sign a platoon player to play right field and then another bat to play right field. So try to get like 3 players for the price of a Nick Castellanos.
But why though? Like, what does that solve? Nothing.
Well, so here's what I think it may not solve anything. I don't disagree with you, but the reason why I almost feel like that running it back, or I almost feel like this: if you run it back next year, what are the odds that this team ends up in the World Series? I would say very, very slim. Outside of the possibility of this is baseball and anything can happen. They're a year older. You're a year removed from being in the World Series. Kyle Schwarber, can we expect him to continue to have these big power years? Maybe. Castellanos actually had a really good year last year. Can we expect that? Trey Turner. Like, all these guys need to continue, not only to contribute, but need to do better. They can't do worse. They need to do better. Do we expect more of Alec Boehm last year? He was actually an all-star. Do we expect more out of Bryson Stott? I would hope so. He took a step back this year. JT Realmuto is a 33-year-old catcher that had knee surgery this year. So when I'm projecting, I don't want to say that you retool and you rebuild, because you're never going to do that with Bryce Harper. You're always going to try to keep that window open a little bit. I just don't know. I just don't know how anybody thinks that this is a championship level team based on what you saw the last 2 years. So I don't know what you do, but I just feel like that if you just stand pat and you try to add like a bench bat or something like that, that you're going to end up at the same spot you were this year, which is going home early.
So I think with this team, no matter what, you got to figure out a creative solution, especially if you're not looking to spend the money that, and I think they could easily just spend money. And that's what I want to get at, is that Will and I was trying to argue for why the Phillies will go after Juan Soto. I'm not going to tell you they're going to get Juan Soto, and neither are you probably, but they're going to make him an offer. He's a Boris client. It'd be weird if they didn't. And I think with that said, one creative solution: can you put Bryce Harper in outfield for one season and always put him back at first base if you want to? If you need an outfielder that bad, and his arm is fine by now, fine enough to throw, hit the cutoff man at least, or whatever. There's your outfield problem. You sign a Christian Walker, or your worst case, you can sign Rhys Hoskins.
Yeah, was that just a 1-year contract that he signed?
It was
there. Yeah,
there's an option.
So there's an option. So here's the thing. And Juan Soto's a great player, and I wouldn't put it past John Middleton, because he wants to win he wants his bleeping trophy back, right? He's shown that he's going to spend. And when Citizens Bank Park is filled, they're printing money down there. Mm-hmm. Man, do they print money. So he's shown before that he's willing to spend. The one thing I'll say about Soto, and it's less about the player and it's more about the big picture of things. The Yankees have tried to buy a championship since 2009. and they haven't sniffed a World Series. I mean, maybe they've sniffed the World Series, but you know what I mean. It's so difficult to go out and just to say, okay, let's write a check for this guy. Let's write a check for that guy. I mean, the Yankees are signing MVPs. They're signing Garrett Cole. They're signing this guy. They're signing that guy. You know, Aaron Judge just batting 091 in the league champion in the divisional series. Like you can lose that. It doesn't mean he's not a great player. So like at some point, and this is, I'm going to get back to you mentioned the prospects in a second. Justin Crawford's, he's not ready to contribute on a major league level. I would disagree with you if you think he's ready to really contribute on a championship level team. Well, even in 2026, this guy's a singles hitter. He has very little power. He notched it up a little bit this year. His game is speed and defense. But even if we're not talking about 2025, I'm going to tell you 2026, if you're expecting a big impact from Crawford, I mean, maybe he can have some impact. And Aiden Miller, he hasn't played above A ball. So I don't know what he's going to be. To me, he looks like a third baseman that doesn't have plus power. So could he be a better Bryson Stott? Yeah, like he could be. He could also be the next Bryson Stott that isn't as good defensively. So it'd be nice if they had a prospect that was really ready to step up right now, because they don't. So now you don't have anybody that's coming up through the minors that can insert other than Andrew Painter, and he's going to be a part of things next year. But you don't really have anybody that's stepping up and able to kind of add the natural energy that we're talking about. So I don't know if there's a move to be made out there. I don't know if there's a move to be made out there that's going to improve this team. I think Dombrowski will sniff around regarding it. He tried to move Castellanos this year. I don't know if he tried last year. I don't know if he tries it again. But I just think that bringing back the same team with the same manager, and if you're bringing back the hitting coach, you're not changing anything. And after last postseason and 2023, the way the offense went in the toilet, I don't know how you come back status quo. That's the only thing that I'm saying.
You know, the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result. And it kind of feels like there are a lot of teams in baseball, maybe Phillies are one of them, that are doing that. They're doing the same thing every single year and they're expecting a different result, and it's just not working, and something needs to be shaken up. And it could be coaching, like you just mentioned, it could be a clubhouse guy, like I said earlier, who knows what it could be, because like you said, it's baseball and anything can happen in baseball. Anything can happen in playoff baseball. The team that wins the World Series is the team that gets hot at the end. It's not necessarily the best team for the season. Look at the Dodgers and the Giants a couple years ago that won 105 and 106 games, and neither of them won the World Series that year. And look at the Washington Nationals in 2018 that were terrible before the All-Star break and then ended up winning it all with Max Scherzer and Steven Strasburg leading the way. Unfortunately, Harper wasn't able to get a championship because he was already in Philadelphia at that time. But it just goes to show you the Diamondbacks that completely fell off, that made it to the World Series last year. The Texas Rangers that won the World Series last year. The famous quote from Corey Seager. It's baseball is a very weird sport. It is the most unpredictable sport, in my opinion, and it's like John Murrow, to go to your point about like what's the one move that you can make to make this team maybe win a World Series championship. I don't think that's for anyone to say. Everything's a gamble in baseball. You go in there, it's a crapshoot. You try your best, what you think is going to happen. That's why these guys are back there looking at all these analytics. You're not just looking at batting average and how many home runs they hit. You're going back to Moneyball, and you're looking at how many times they get on base every year. And I mean, look at like starting pitching. The starting pitching now compared to 15 years ago is completely changed. Guys are going 5 innings. There's no one throwing a 90 pitch complete game anymore. We don't see that anymore because everyone is trying to go for the strikeout. The strikeout is awesome, but it shouldn't be everyone's bread and butter. And everyone's throwing 105 miles an hour now. Yeah. That's why we had 30 Tommy John surgeries this year, because everyone's just getting rid of their arm before they even reach 30 years old.
Yeah, and I think with the Phillies specifically, if we want to go back to the Phillies more than anything here, I think the Phillies are set with pitching. And I do want to focus and kind of reiterate what my move would be.
But what do you do with Taijuan Walker? I'm sorry to cut you off, but what do you do with Taijuan Walker that you're still paying a lot of money to? And what do? You put him in AAA? Do you just keep him on the bench? Do you move him to the bullpen? No one's going to take him. No one wants to trade for him.
I think he's your sixth starter, and you bring Painter up. You don't want to overdo it with him with innings. And I mean, there's two things you can do. What they're going to do is they're going to try to move him in the offseason, which isn't going to happen. They're going to bring him to spring training. They're going to tell everybody how he's worked and his velocity's back. And he looks great and all this other stuff. And then if he comes out and he sucks again, or if he's just so bad in spring training, they'll probably release him. But they're going to give it another shot. I mean, he's owed, was it $34 million? It was a $17 million a year contract or something like that. So he still has 2 years left on the contract. So, John, I think that they bring him back and they hope for the best. And if the stuff doesn't recover, I mean, at the very least, he can eat innings. He can get beat up for 3 or 4 innings every 5 days or whatever. But I don't know. I mean, he acted like a professional. He said all the right things. It seemed like that everybody, like, he realized he sucked last year. So I agree with you. Pitching's fine.
Yeah, I think pitching's fine. I think with Taijuan Walker, I'm fine with him. I honestly would like to never see him on my starting mound again. I'm fine with him if you need like a long relief, but that's about it. Otherwise, I would almost kind of look to see if another team has a terrible contract that we could use that position a little bit more.
Good point.
I had mentioned a Chris Bryant, and I know that sounds terrible on the surface, but even if Colorado, which we've seen them do with Nolan Arenado, ate half of that contract, and we traded a Taijuan Walker for their problem in Chris Bryant, I would do it. But I did want to reiterate, going back to what one move that I would do, and I think this kind of encapsulates everything that was wrong with the second half 2024 Phillies. Had they traded for Brent Rooker, we're still alive right now. Brent Rooker was the best, literally the best hitter in baseball. Let me pull up his numbers here. Brent Rooker only batted .295 with 18 homers and 50 RBIs with a .908 OPS. And if you can imagine what that would be behind Bryce Harper instead of whatever we saw from Bohm, Real Muto, or anything like that, I can only imagine that if the Athletics...
The stadium context also, because there's a lot more home runs in Citizens Bank than there is in Oakland.
That's a huge stadium, man.
We are so just think of what that trade would have done and what it still can do. So this is why it's my move. But if Brent Rooker is traded to Philadelphia, we are the number 1 seed. We're playing the Padres right now. Not for nothing, but it's a different conversation.
Well, I mean, I agree with you. Hayes not only did he give you nothing, he gave you negative impact. He really did. The uncompetitive at bats he had, where you're putting a lifetime AAA player starting in a playoff game because he's so bad. And I think Weston Wilson's, was a pretty good player this year. But Dombrowski did he's a Hall of Fame general manager. He did a very poor job at the deadline.
But I think that's my whole thing with Rob Thompson, is that Rob Thompson said these guys are good enough because I believe in them and they believe in me. And their guys are also feeding back. They love that he believes in them. But at some point, we have to have these hard conversations and say, are we just too easy on our guys? And the Philly fans, I know we aren't. But if we're just looking ourselves in the mirror and being honest, we saw this team in the second half play 500 baseball.
Yep.
So I don't know. There's a lot of things we can do to fix this team. There's a lot of ideas I've got, but there's no one quick solution either. That's unfortunate here.
There's not. And you mentioned like when you go back, you look at what Pat Gillick did with the Phillies, because the core was here and it was a great young dynamic core. He was able to finish the team off. And that's something that I would expect Dombrowski would likewise be able to do. And you look at some of the moves that Pat Gillick made in 2008 at the trade deadline, got Scott Air. That was actually when they still made the waiver trades. That was after the trade deadline. They got Scott Air, left-handed reliever. He was excellent coming in. The year before, they got Joe Blanton that year at the trade deadline. He was a big part. They got Jamie Moyer a couple of years before that, I believe the previous year before that, who ended up contributing as the starting pitcher. He led the team in wins that year. So, Dombrowski needs to start making moves. It's easy when you can just write the biggest check. It feels like those checks have run out. So now you got to actually make some moves. I need a shrewd move from Dombrowski right now in the offseason, whether that's a trade, an under the radar signing. I mean, Pat Gillick made a mistake and signed Jeff Jenkins. He made a mistake and signed Adam Eaton. But those things got washed away because Jason Worth was signed on like a 1-year contract and a low money contract. He ended up being your right fielder. So the Jenkins thing didn't bite you. Adam Eaton sucked, but you had enough starting pitching. So like Dombrowski needs to do the best job that he's done since he's gotten here if this team's going to get back to the World Series.
100%.
Now, what do you do with the bullpen though? Because we know the Estevez and Hoffman struggles, right? But they're both free agents after this season. So now you're losing 2 of your key pieces that were a huge part of the regular season after the trade. And they didn't show up in the playoffs, and shit happens. But now it's like, what do you do? Because you're losing those 2 arms.
Man, and it's not like that relievers are cheap these days, right? We're talking about where the Phillies projected payroll is and how much money do they spend. Well, they're gonna have to move salary or something, or they're gonna go with the luxury tax. What's Hoffman gonna make? $15 million a year, $12 million a year, something like that. Josh Hader made $19 million this year. Kenley Jansen has a salary of $16 million this year. Edwin Diaz, $19 million. Nick Martinez, $14 million. Ryan Presley, $14 million. Kimbrel, he stole $12 million from the Orioles this year. But you get my point. Free agent relievers, Jeff Hoffman, despite his struggles in the playoffs, was unbelievable this year, right? Yeah. And he's got high-end stuff. He's got great velocity. He has a mean slider. And Estevez throws 100 miles an hour. I think that Estevez, if I don't know if you can bring both back, but I think Estevez comes back because he is at least a closer. Yes. Hoffman can be a closer, but he's not a true closer. So I actually think they bring Estevez back and Hoffman makes his money somewhere else.
Yeah, I agree with that too. And I think he's, you can't keep both. I would rather have a bat and figure it out later with a bullpen arm, because we are, I don't want to say rich on arms, but richer than with bats. Yeah. And I think bats were our problem. So if we can even flip one of the starting arms potentially, I love the Christopher Sanchez contract. I don't think I would consider trading Ranger or anything either, but some of the younger prospects, if we could potentially flip that into some bullpen help or bats, I think that could be an answer for us, but see how it plays out. Yeah,
and then maybe even moving Taijuan Walker to the bullpen. That could be something that, it's kind of out of left field, but it could work. We've seen it before where, starting pitchers transition into the bullpen, and just something about not being out there starting the game. It's something that clicked for them, and sometimes it's not even just going from starting pitching to relief. It's going from position playing to pitching. Kenley Jansen, that you just mentioned, he was a catcher, and he got drafted as a catcher and then ended up being a world-class closer for the Dodgers for 10 years.
Long time. Yeah. Yeah. It's be curious to see, because Kerkering also, he hasn't showed me a lick of high leverage in his repertoire. He's good. Don't get me wrong, but it feels like every time that he's really faced a big spot in the playoffs, he's come up small. So yeah, you should be able to figure out the bullpen. Going back to Pat Gillick, he used to only like to sign relievers to 1-year contracts, because 1 year they can be one of the best back ends or best 7th inning or 8th inning guy in Major League Baseball, and then the next year you're designating him for assignment because he's struggling. So you want to sign a guy to a three-year contract, $45 million, and he sucks. Now you're sitting there with a not even a closer, but a late inning guy that's making a lot of money and not producing. They have holes on this team. This is not going to be easy. They have a limited amount of money that they can spend. So, they got to figure it out.
Let's look back real quick to the 2014 Phillies, similar situation, similar team that was similar on the cusp, and they signed Jonathan Papelbon. And let's not repeat history here. So that's that. If we're going to show that way, maybe that's the way to do it. I can't be doing that. And we saw that just doesn't work.
Yeah, you wonder what Estevez's market will be out there. It doesn't feel like it's going to be more than, I mean, maybe 10, $12 million a year, but
Mhm.
I don't know. I mean, how much money are they willing to spend? It almost seems like they're going to have to move some salary to add some guys on this team.
Maybe,
Make it
or
look-
maybe they're just like, F it. Let's just go over the luxury tax. It's only going to be for a couple seasons because there's a lot of money coming off the books 2 years from now anyway.
Mhm.
Yep. It's possible.
Johnny Marks, thank you so much. We appreciate you greatly.
Anytime, man. Appreciate it. Good stuff.
Yeah, this was really fun, man. We appreciate you coming on. For anyone still watching, make sure you click that link in the description down below. Follow Jon Marks Media at the Philly Sports Network on YouTube. Do you have a link tree or?
I do. If you go to my Instagram or my Twitter, at Jon Marks MRKS Media.
All right, I do follow you on Instagram, so I will get that link and I'll put that in the description down below as well.
I appreciate it. That has the podcast version, the audio podcast. It has the YouTube. It has all my stuff. So yeah, appreciate you spreading the word.
And speaking as a true Philly sports fan, not just on the radio, but just enjoying all media, you got to watch and tune in for Johnny Marks show. Jon Marks is still so much the voice of Philly sports, and he's so on top of it. Obviously, you can see just bringing up Scott Air references here on a baseball podcast at 10 o'clock on the day they get eliminated. So, Jon Marks, you are the best. I appreciate
Thank you.
And John, one more thing before we log off, and I do want to ask this because it is in the media right now. Now, Pete Rose, rest in peace, has passed, and there's a lot of talks about possibly moving him into the Hall of Fame now because they weren't going to give him the satisfaction while he was alive. So what is your take on that real quick?
I mean, they would have to make him eligible because he's not even eligible for the Hall of Fame because of his status with Major League Baseball. But I mean, not to, for semantics or whatever, I do not believe Pete Rose should be in the Hall of Fame. He's obviously a great player, but anytime you're the manager of a team and you're betting even on your team, you're messing with the integrity of the game, which cannot happen. If you're betting $25,000 on games, and I invite anybody, Google it. Google the Dowd report. Pete was betting with multiple bookies. Pete was betting with multiple middlemen. Pete was as dirty as you could imagine, and overall a bad guy. My first memories of life were the 1980 World Series, the Phillies, and I loved Pete Rose. I think the first memory of my life was Bob Boone bobbling the ball and Pete Rose being there, Johnny on the spot, boom, snagging the ball, bouncing the ball on the vet turf over to the pitcher. But you can't do it. You can't bet for your team. It is the cardinal sin. It is the one thing you can't do. It can ruin the sports. It can ruin the sport. It can take baseball away from everybody. So,
as we saw just a few months ago, also when the best player on the planet almost got in trouble for doing the exact same thing.
Imagine if he would have been, and I believe that he didn't really have an idea that was going on. Imagine if he was involved in that, what that would have done. Now Congress is involved. Now, it's a total shit show. So you cannot have the manager doing that. And you look at gambling today with how prevalent it is. And I can go on the Bet Parks app right now and say, oh, I'm going to bet this or I bet that. Right. And players are betting, and we've seen NFL players get caught for doing it at the facilities and betting on their own games or whatever. But if you're a manager, if you're a player, obviously that's really bad. But if you're a manager, if Pete has $25,000 on a game, and he needs to get this win, and it's like, all right, I'm going back to trying to think who was one of his relievers would have been with the Reds in 1988 or something. Yeah, you can pitch for the fourth day in a row. I need you in the seventh inning. Yeah, I know that you have nothing left in your arm, right? Like, you may not even realize what you're doing. And I've had multiple people that knew Pete that all said the same thing, that Pete's biggest downfall was he wasn't as smart as he thought he was. Pete was a dumb guy, just like a really stupid guy, brilliant baseball guy. He remembers almost every bat that he ever took. And I've met Pete on a couple of different occasions. Talking baseball with him is something that he loves to do. He'll talk baseball with anybody. Somebody comes up to him and asks him about something, he'll talk to you for an hour. Pete is a great, great baseball guy, but a dumb and a bad dude. Rest in peace, by the way. I mean, I'm not trying to piss on his grave, but rest in peace, Pete.
All right,
so
John.
No thank you very much.
No Hall of Fame for Pete. No.
Gotcha. Yeah.
Thank you very much for joining us on the show, man. We really appreciate it. We'd love to have you again as a guest. And I did catch your show this morning. Very interesting takes. It actually prepared me for today's show to talk more about the Phillies as well. So I do appreciate you and Tyler. You're number 2. So that was a great show, and I appreciate you guys putting out the good content that you do.
Oh, thanks, guys. I appreciate it. Look forward to seeing you guys again soon.
Appreciate you.
All right.
See you soon.
And for Real Talk Baseball, I am Will Power. This was Jon Murrow and Jon Marks Media, and we'll see you guys next time.